This series of videos is an attempt to help you understand more about the music that surrounds you every day and ultimately help you enjoy what you hear. In this first video, we will listen to audio samples of orchestral string instruments. All the samples have been taken from YouTube and the links will be given at the end of the video. The more we learn about music, the more we realize it is its own language. There are many nouns and adjectives unique to music. Part of learning music then is to learn its vocabulary or terminology. Today we'll focus on names of orchestral string instruments. The string instruments used in an orchestra are the violin, the viola, the cello, which was short for violoncello, and the double bass or contrabass. Each of these instruments grew out of other similar instruments that preceded them, but these are the four we now have in the standard orchestra. In addition to knowing the names of these instruments, we also need to train our ears to identify their sound. First up is the violin. This is a clip of the great Israeli violinist Itzhak Perlman playing Johann Sebastian Bach's Chaconne for violin. You hear Mr. Perlman playing by himself, but he's able to produce more than one note at a time. The violin, like all the string instruments we'll look at today, has 4 strings and is usually played with a bow. The bow is drawn perpendicular, or at right angle, across the strings, and the friction between the bow and the strings causes the strings to vibrate. Depending on the angle of the bow, a player can make contact with 1 or sometimes 2 strings at a time. The violin has the highest range of the orchestral string instruments and can reach very high pitches. Its lowest note is the G below middle C because that's its lowest string. Its highest? Well, that largely depends on the player. In addition to orchestral or classical music, the violin is an instrument used in folk music settings around the world. In the following example, we hear a violinist called Mark Oates from an Australian band called the Finn McCool Band, and just so you know, Finn McCool was a legendary Irish giant, playing some very Irish music. Very different from the first example, but the same instrument. The violin is a versatile instrument indeed. We often hear the term fiddle used when the violin plays folk music, and a fiddle is just another name for the violin when it is used to play folk music. Incidentally, the Austrian composer Gustav Mahler calls for a violin to be played like a fiddle in his 4th symphony. Gustav Mahler, like many other composers of classical music, liked to draw on the music of his native country. Moving on to the next lowest orchestral string instrument, the viola, we hear a similar but more resonant, deeper tone. This is a short extract from the cadenza of Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki's Viola Concerto, performed by Jonathan Fontaine. As notes on the viola are produced in the same way as on the violin, the viola sounds very similar to the violin. Like the violin, the viola is held under the chin when played. It takes practice to tell the difference between the two, and sometimes it is really difficult to tell them apart. To make things even more challenging, the viola can also sound similar to the cello. The cello, though, is lower than the viola. Again, it has 4 strings, and they are tuned to the same notes as the viola, but at an octave below. The cello has a really rich sound, as can be heard in this extract of Song Number 3 from Songs and Poems for Solo Cello by American composer Philip Glass, performed here by Wendy Sutter. As you know, when the cello is played, it sits on top of a spike or end pin which protrudes from the bottom of the instrument. The last instrument in the orchestral string family is the double bass or contrabass, and that too is held upright when played, hence another name for the instrument, the upright bass. This is the lowest of the four instruments and can, at its lowest extremes, have a gravelly, growly sound. You can hear that timbre, or sound quality, in the following extract from the third movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, performed here by Matthew Gibson of the London Symphony Orchestra as part of their YouTube Symphony Orchestra Masterclass series. Like the violin, the double bass is found in genres of music other than classical, perhaps most notably jazz. In this sample of a walking bass line, so called because the player's fingers seem to walk back and forth on the strings, the strings are played with the fingers rather than the bow. This is called pizzicato, and all four orchestral string instruments can be played in this way. Listen here to Marco Panacea play a bass line for Blues in F by Charlie Parker. Having heard all the instruments individually, let's listen to them in combination. Here we have the beginning of the second movement of Claude Debussy's String Quartet in G minor. You can hear a combination of arco, notes played with the bow, and pizzicato, strings plucked by the fingers, at the same time. I wonder if you can tell which instruments were playing in that last extract. Well, a string quartet, which is a combination of string instruments for which many composers have written pieces, contains two violins, a viola, and a cello. It's an ensemble that provides many possibilities for the composer and is a small enough group to fit in even the smallest performance venues. Many compositions for string quartet, however, are far from small. Some last 30 or 45 minutes or more and can be quite dramatic. For a fuller ensemble sound, we hear now the opening of the second movement of Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik, or A Little Night Music. Here we have a traditional grouping of orchestral strings. There are four different parts being played. Actually, you only hear three at the beginning because the violas don't start until the fifth measure, or bar. The four different parts, however, do not line up with the four different orchestral instruments. The violins are split into two groups, first violins and second violins. The third part is played by the violas, and the cellos and basses play the fourth part together, but an octave apart. This last extract is the beginning of Dvorak's Serenade for Strings, Opus 22. So you know, the word opus is Latin for work, and is usually used by the composer, publisher, or person who may be cataloguing a composer's compositions to denote a composition of significance. It's usually followed by a number, and works are usually categorized in chronological order. So Opus 1 would be a piece composed before Opus 2. So Dvorak's Serenade for Strings, Opus 22, was composed 88 years after Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik, but uses essentially the same assignment of parts. Now the cellos and basses have separate parts. There are 5 different lines to be heard here.